Question. Thanks, Kim. Curious to get your thoughts on people using creativity to deal with feelings of hopelessness and depression. I've noticed people often have a drive or desire to do something in order to deal with boredom or feelings of emptiness in their lives. But how much of this is valid rather than just dealing with whatever that is causing us to feel empty in the first place? Is it possible to be whole, complete, and at peace without really doing anything? Or do we always need to be doing something, have some kind of vision or forward momentum to feel balanced and at peace? Well, actually a very profound question, because it has different layers, you know. I remember when I was young, 18 years old, first realized there's a spiritual path. If I look back at it, I can see that in the last couple of years before I discovered the spiritual path, I was actually quite peaceful. I was what many people today talk about, living in the now. And I was just happy being in high school and, you know, studying in high school and doing whatever I was doing. And then when I found the spiritual path, I made a clear shift, because up until then, even though I'd always sensed there was a spiritual side of life, but I had not had anything stimulated. So up until then, I didn't really have a purpose in life. And all of a sudden, I now saw, yes, there's a purpose to life, raising my consciousness, and I want it, so I'm going to give it all, my all. And so I went into a state of, as the question says, doing. I always had to be doing something. You know, first it was meditation. Meditate. Take these courses. Try to convert other people to meditate. Then I found Ascended Master teaching. I left the meditation movement, got disappointed with that, and then I really had a vacuum where for several years I was depressed. Because I didn't have a clear sense of purpose. I felt I had made some mistakes, and so I was actually worse off than when I was before I found the spiritual path, where I was living in the now and happy-go-lucky and this and that. It also has something to do with becoming a parent at a very young age and having 2 young children and feeling overwhelmed by the responsibility and this kind of thing. But nevertheless, so then I found my second spiritual movement and the Ascended Master movement, where there was all this talk, we are saving the world for Saint Germain by giving all these decrees. And all of a sudden I was doing, and I went from Denmark to the United States to be at the headquarters of this movement, and I was giving all of these several hour-long decree sessions that we were doing collectively in groups, and I was just doing, and studying the teachings and this and that. So I perfectly understand that many people, whether they're using a spiritual teaching or creativity, they can go into this state of doing. And I believe that it's very, very natural in our age. I have talked about it a little bit before, how a lot of people in today's age, they are spiritual people. But we grew up in Western society where there's nothing that stimulates our spiritual longing, but we still have the longing. And we can't be satisfied with an ordinary life of pursuing a career and working in the same job for 40 years. It's just not enough for us. So we are, in a sense, bored with that kind of life. And so many people are looking for a way to overcome the boredom, overcome the sense of purposelessness, that nothing really matters, that nothing isn't really worth engaging in. And some people use creativity, other people use work or career or studies, and some people, as myself, use spirituality. So for me, for years, probably 20 years, maybe not quite 20, but quite a number of years, spirituality was my way of dealing with the boredom of life. And it was keeping my mind busy, so I never had time to be bored because I was always so focused on doing. But then in the early 90s, I did realize, and the Ascended Masters actually was starting to say it at that time, that we needed to resolve our psychology in order to really make spiritual progress. And I started realizing then that resolution of psychology is actually the key to spiritual progress. Before, I thought it was doing all the outer things, you see. And this is a very common phase that many people go through. First, we think we have to do and do and do. And I'm still looking back at this and saying, yeah, even though I was unbalanced in the way I was doing things, I had to go through this phase to rise to a certain level of consciousness. So I'm not really regretting doing it. But there came that point where I realized that the only way I'm really going to get to a higher level of the path is to start working on my psychology. So I did. I went into therapy. And this ties in, different kinds of therapy, and this ties in with, as the questioner says, how much of this is valid rather than just dealing with whatever that is causing us to feel empty in the first place. And what's causing us to feel empty in the first place is our unresolved psychology, what I in many videos call the subconscious selves, the separate selves. Because when you, as I've said, when you go into this illusion, you're a separate being, and you go into the duality consciousness, first you go through a long period where you're always struggling. Because as I said, in duality, there's two opposite polarities. You're always struggling against somebody. So you're struggling. But many spiritual people, we have done this for so many past lifetimes, we've had enough of the struggle. We are, in a sense, bored with the struggle and the drama that is in the duality consciousness. So we are looking for something else. But the only way to get to that peaceful state of mind that we're actually longing for is to resolve the remnants of the duality consciousness, this illusion of separation that we still have in our consciousness, and that's these separate selves, subconscious selves. And so it's very, very true, as the questioner says, that this is the only way to really overcome the boredom and the dissatisfaction with the dualistic struggle. We may think it's the outer society or career or work that we're dissatisfied with it, but it's really the dualistic struggle. And life doesn't have to be a struggle, you know. So the question says, is it possible to be whole, complete, and at peace without really doing anything? Or do we always need to be doing something, have some kind of vision or forward momentum to feel balanced and at peace? Now see, there is another level. And let's put it this way. I was doing for many years. I look back and I say, it was okay that I was doing. I needed to do this. I needed to invoke spiritual light from the Ascended Masters for many, many hours to transmute the energies or the karma from past lives. It was necessary that I did this. But I also look back and I can see I didn't do it with a balanced state of mind. I did it with an obsessive compulsive state of mind. And I, of course, saw many, many other people, both in my second spiritual movement or first spiritual movement, I've seen in later movements, that people become obsessive compulsive about it. And that, of course, takes away our peace. But the obsessive compulsion comes from these unresolved selves that we have. You know, and it can be that you had a subconscious self that blocked your vision that there's a spiritual path. Somehow you get over that self. You see the illusion of that self, and you find an outer spiritual teaching, you see there is a spiritual path. But now you have another subconscious self that says, this was certainly the case for me, oh look, you wasted all this time, or you could have known about the spiritual path. Now you have to compensate by really doing everything you can to catch up. But that's still just a separate self that's driving you. As I said, it was necessary. I did a lot of things, and many other people, it's the same thing. It was necessary to do these things, but we didn't have to be obsessive compulsive about it, so we lived a very unbalanced life that took away our state of peace. We could actually have been at peace about it and doing it with peace of mind. So what I'm saying is, it isn't really a matter of doing or not doing. It's a matter of the state of mind you have, whether you're doing or not doing. Because you see, you find this, you especially find it in the East, in some strands of Buddhism, and you also find it in some of the modern non-duality, where the goal is to still the mind, empty the mind, have peace of mind, and you have to meditate and meditate to still the mind. But you see, there are people who are attempting to still the mind from an obsessive compulsive state of mind. It doesn't really help you, does it? If you are obsessive about meditating to still the mind, you are not going to have peace of mind. On the other hand, these people, there are also people who say, you should do nothing. Some of the non-dualists. There is no path. There is no thing you have, no practice you have to do. You just need to have a switch in consciousness. And in order to achieve that, you have to do nothing. Well, this is where it gets complex. Okay? You can have a person who has been in this state of mind of doing, perhaps for lifetimes. And if that person accepts, oh, let me just try and do nothing, well, it is possible that the person will then suddenly relax, and there will be an opening in the mind so that the person sees that it wasn't necessary to be obsessive compulsive about doing. It's possible, and I think this has happened to some people. They have just stepped outside of this doing state of mind, and they have been able to, by doing nothing or accepting that you don't have to do anything, you've been able to relax and experience a greater sense of peace, at least for a time. For some people, I can see it only lasts for a time, but that's because they still have subconscious selves they haven't resolved. So, but this doesn't mean that this will work for everybody, and it doesn't mean that you should, in general, say you shouldn't be doing anything. So, the way I look at it is, I can see, we can talk about other phases, but we can talk about 3 general phases. For me, there was a time I was focused on doing the outer things. This is what I call the outer path. I was doing the outer practice, studying the outer teachings. And I was obsessive compulsive about it. Then it came a phase where I realized, no, the real goal of the spiritual path is the resolution of psychology, so I better get on with that. And then when I had reached a certain level of the resolution of psychology, that's when I started the next phase of my individual life plan, where I started working with the Ascended Masters to bring out teachings. And this started in 2002. And you can basically, if you look at my life since then, you can basically be saying, well, I've been doing. I published 80 books. I have websites that have more material for free than is in the 80 books. So there's an enormous amount of material produced. So you could say that for 22 years I've been doing. But I haven't been doing it in an obsessive compulsive way or with a lack of peace that I had before. I won't say I was totally at peace with it when I started in 2002, but I have over time gradually become more and more at peace with the work I'm doing. So I'm doing without being obsessive compulsive about it, and I'm not doing it to overcome boredom or to distract my attention from what I haven't looked at in myself. You see what I'm saying? And I think there are millions of spiritual people who either have gone through or are going through or are meant to go through the exact same phases. It's like first you find the spiritual path, you go into overcompensating because you grew up without any awareness of the path, and then when you realize that it's really about resolving psychology and you start working on your psychology, you gradually resolve enough psychology, which is the first phase of your life plan. And when you have resolved enough psychology, you start going into the final phase of your life plan, which is your gift, what you are here to give to Earth. And when you have resolved psychology, you can give your gift without being obsessive compulsive about it, meaning you can be at peace. And you're not doing it to compensate. You're not doing it to overcome boredom, because you're not bored anymore. I mean, I haven't been bored for the last 22 years. It's been constant joy of actually seeing how the work I've been doing has been unfolding. I mean, it's just, astounding when you look at it. The amount of teachings that have been brought forth, the profundity of these teachings coming from the Ascended Masters. And I'm not trying to make myself special here, because millions of spiritual people have an individual contribution to make to Earth that's just as important as any other mission. So, so I'm just saying that, you know, it's natural we start out being obsessive compulsive. But if we are willing to work on our psychology, we can work through that. And then we have to avoid going into this blind alley of saying, oh, anything in this world is anti-spiritual, so the most spiritual thing we can do is do nothing. We just sit around in a cave in the Himalayas and meditate on God. That's the most spiritual thing we can do. Because for many, many people, I would say the vast majority of spiritual people in the Aquarian age, this is not the highest potential we have. Our highest potential is actually to bring a gift, to go out, share our process, express our Christhood, whatever you want to call it, express our higher consciousness. And that's what's in our life plan. And that's why, as I've said before, if you are attached to some outer opinion, that's a spiritual person, I should be doing nothing, then you cannot tune in to your divine plan. Or if, as for that matter, if you're attached to, oh, I have to be doing this spiritual practice for the rest of my life, and then I will qualify for my ascension, nirvana, or whatever. Either way, it can prevent you from being so neutral that you can actually tune into what is in your life plan. Again, I'm not trying to tell you, it could be in your life plan to do nothing. Only you can know that. But it could also be that it is in your life plan to bring a specific gift that only you can bring. And you don't want to miss it by sitting around doing nothing. So don't force with the outer mind yourself into a certain pattern, but be flexible, be neutral, so you can feel when you have resolved enough psychology, you've attained enough inner peace, now it's time to go out again. Oftentimes, we go in to get peace, and then when we have the peace, we can go out and bring that peace.